Good morning, afternoon, evening, everybody. Today is going to be great. And that is because we are talking about the big word of digital transformation. My name is Mike Koyle. I am the Executive Director at NativeForce. And if you are wondering what NativeForce is, it is a nonprofit that takes donations from people like you and companies that you may work at, and we use those proceeds in order to provide training to Native Americans. So I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to talk about today's topic, which is digital transformation. And basically what I do is I take my 15 plus years of experience in digital marketing and pass it along to you for free. So that's what we're going to talk about today. All right, so let's talk about digital transformation. And maybe you've heard the word, maybe you haven't heard the word, but here's the deal. Every once in a while, especially in marketing, you're going to hear these really big terms. And these big terms are going to be a little bit scary. But when you break them down and think about exactly what they mean, they're actually not so bad at all. If you went out and you were, especially if you went to a conference, you're talking to work colleagues and you asked them, what is digital transformation? They're probably going to say a little bit something like this. It's basically taking those processes that perhaps are a little bit antiquated and moving those into a digital space in order to meet the expectations of today's customer.
So then that begs the question, what is the customer expectation? And a way to simplify that is a customer expects to go to a website, an app, whatever it may be in that digital space, and complete the entire process in that space in one session. So if a customer is expected to call customer service, download a PDF, something that is a bit old school, then at that point it's time to start thinking about how you're going to support those processes in a digital space. And once you do that, then at that point you are meeting customer expectations, and you are going to have to digitally transform in order to meet those expectations.
We've all gone to websites. That's kind of our life now. We spend our life on mobile devices, apps, and all of that. And our expectation, even being on the other side of the coin, is for that process to be fluid and to meet our needs. And how many times have you left a website and you've said, that was a terrible experience, or that experience wasn't too bad? Now, rarely do we ever say that's a great experience, because that's just who we are as humans. But there are a lot of processes that you go through that you think to yourself and you look back and you think, you know what? That wasn't too bad at all. So where do you start? So you're a company, you want to kick off some sort of digital transformation, and you know that you need to do this, right? Now, if I were to ask you, what would you start with first? My gut is telling me that a lot of you would say, let's jump into the data, which is not a bad thing to do. But let me ask you something. When you're going into the data, do you honestly really know what you're looking for? I know that myself, and I've spent a lot of time, many years in data, it's really hard to distill out of that data exactly what the problem is. And a lot of times what that means is that we'll go into app analytics or we'll go into web analytics, and many times we can see where clickstream dies. And what that means is somebody's clicking through the site, and then at some point we see that there's a big drop off, and we can track this in many of our analytics tools. But what it's not going to always tell you is the why. And the reason that I bring this up is because don't get too stuck on the analytics. Now, the analytics can tell you a lot of information about what you need to do. But let me ask you something. If you're a marketer, what are you paid to do? You're paid to actually use the craft and the strategies that you have and that you've built up over time in order to make some strategic decisions. And when I'm talking about strategy, it's a hypothesis of what exactly you think that it's going to work in order to drive business. So the analytics are great, but don't rely too much on them, because there is still an art when it comes to marketing. And if you think about it, in the recent baseball playoffs, those teams that relied too much on data, what happened to them? They ended up going home, because there's a flow, there's a feel. You have to be able to understand all the dynamics outside of data in order to really press ahead and make some critical business decisions. So I would say, yes, the data is important, but I will tell you which is much more important than the data. And like I said, I've been doing this for a long time, and some of the most useful information that I ever got was bringing my customers in, sitting them down in front of whatever experience I wanted them to talk about and go through it step by step, and they would tell me, they would talk to me. They would let me know exactly what part of the experience was a bit weird, where they were getting hung up on, where there was some information that perhaps was a bit lacking. You cannot replace that with data. And so in my years of experience, I have always felt that the qualitative, which is more of that face-to-face feedback, always trumps that qualitative data. So what you got to do is you got to bring some of your customers in, and you actually need to talk to them about what experience you think works best for them. So you're a big company, a big organization, and what that means is that you have a lot of systems. Perhaps you have your accounting system, you have your customer relationship management system, you got your marketing automation system, you've got your e-commerce system. The short story is that in many organizations, each of these different systems are owned by different organizations or groups within the company. And that's always something that you have to keep in the back of your mind when you're thinking about how you're going to digitally transform. So the question is, you have this big problem, and how are you going to solve it? Well, the first thing you got to do is you got to come up with a thesis, and you have to think about this from the standpoint of all of us that took that English class, right? You came up with the thesis statement, and then you would refer that in order to make sure that you never got too off track when you're writing through your document. Now, when you're talking about digital transformation, it's the same deal. You want to make sure that you have a good thesis statement in order to kind of guide your journeys. So there's going to be a lot of systems that are going to be in the equation. And I'm going to tell you, don't think about those initially when you're thinking about the transformation. And I'm going to tell you why. You should always let the front end lead. And what I mean by that is the experience, right? So the experience that the customer is going to have is the front end. It's the presentation layer. It's what people are actually going to see. That is what you should focus on when there's a digital transformation. If you let the systems drive ultimately what your experience is going to be, you're going to start to introduce constraints to your customer. And what I mean by that is as you go to each of these business units and you say, hey, here's what we want to do, many times what you're going to hear are roadblocks. And what you got to figure out as somebody that's leading a digital transformation is you don't want to start passing along those constraints onto your customers, because that makes the experience much more painful. So that's why you have to start with the front end experience. You want to walk away with a design that meets customer expectations. So let me answer a very complicated question. So one thing that has come up over the years is who actually owns the process when it comes to the digital experience. And I'm going to make it easy for you. It's marketing, 100% marketing. And why is that? Because whenever you hear that word experience, that is a marketing function. And the reason being is because nobody knows the personas, nobody knows the segments, nobody knows the properties and the click streams and how people are flowing and getting to the site better than marketing. And when it comes to running these actual back and forth discussions with your customers, that's really where marketing is going to be able to shine. With any project of this size, and many times we're talking about $5, $10, $15 million projects, you're always, and this probably goes without saying, you're going to need executive sponsorship, because you're going to have those executives in order to see your vision and help push that vision, so that if there are any tiebreakers that are needed down the road, that you have that executive sponsorship in order to keep that vision alive. Always remember, the customer experience is the driver when it comes to digital transformation. And that's really it. Digital transformation is a customer experience that meets customer expectations. And that's really what it comes down to. So let me just throw out a few things. If you're trying to decide if digital transformation is for you, here's a few things that you may want to consider if you're thinking about going into that digital transformation space. One, has your digital properties, has it been more than 3 years since the last time that you have upgraded your properties, it's probably time to start thinking about digital transformation. Do you have any of your processes that rely on people downloading a PDF, printing a piece of paper, printing some type of transaction? Are you needing a wet signature along the way? If the answer is yes to any of those questions, and I think one of the big ones too is if it's requiring people to call customer support, that's a big indication that some digital transformation may be needed for you. So thanks for checking in on today's webinar. My name is Mike Koyle. Like I said, I'm the Executive Director of NativeForce. NativeForce is my passion. It is a company that was founded upon serving others and taking funds in order to provide training just like this to Native Americans so they can get out into that technology space. If you're interested in contacting me for any reason, whether that is for speaking, consulting, whatever, use that same website at nativeforce.org and reach out to me. I'd love to hear you, or send me a direct message. I'd love to hear from any of you. Thanks and have a good day.